is a lot of information, and everyone will tell you that I'm a stickler for my rules for how long this lasts. So I'm gonna try very hard to get us out of here no later than 9. And so what we want to try to just cover tonight is the scenarios of what will happen at the Dale location if this passes or if this fails. The questions tonight will just be coming from the Warrant Committee. And so for anyone out there in computer land, if you have questions, I just want to read the question should be sent to our email address, which is warrantcommittee@medfield.net. And then I'm also going to make a personal plea that there are a couple of people, citizens that have my personal work email, and I'd appreciate it if you start using the Warrant Committee at Medfield.net so that I don't have to keep forwarding the things over. So
Unless they could pay a fee.
well, yeah, I suppose I could start charging by the hour. That would be good. But we're going to try to just go with that. So with that being said, so we have here we have for the Warrant Committee, we have Jill and Steve and Amanda, myself, Bob and Ed. And then Newton, will you just announce yourself and say that you're participating remotely, please?
Newton Thompson, participating remotely.
Great. Okay, so I think to just kind of jump in, the first thing we're going to want to cover is the future of Dale if this fails versus if this passes. And so this is really more of a question of MSBA process. So I think I'm going to toss it to you, Tim, because you had already talked to us at one of the last meetings about what is the process if the vote fails in November. And I was wondering if you could just run through that for everybody, since we have a lot of attendees here that weren't here at the last time we talked about it.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thank you, guys, and thank you for all the work you do. I know you guys go through a tremendous period with all these articles and warrants and all. So, as you know, I think, as you know, we're on the docket to be on the MSBA board meeting in October 25th. That board, so in the MSBA process, there's 2 votes. There's one for a preferred schematic, which we had previously. Sorry about that. And then that basically just establishes the concept of the project, and where basically what the fact that we've put a project in front of them. It's going to be a new elementary school. The enrollment's going to be so much. The size is so much. It's going to be located behind the Wheelock School. Sorry about that. I'm here alone and I have dog duty, so you may hear a little bit more of that. So then that vote, after that vote, we moved into schematic design, and we also, of course, as you know, took a pause and reflection on the after the town meeting that occurred, and did continued sort of the communications and basically the committees, and as far as I know, the selectmen and the school committee arrived at the same unanimous conclusion that we move forward. So we've essentially moved the schematic design, which basically represents about 25% of the design process, and does enough detail so that you can put an accurate price to it. And that's the price that the community knows about and has heard about. So this is the second vote for the MSBA, School Building Authority. And essentially it's called the Project Scope and Budget Agreement, but essentially it sets the terms of the deal in terms of reimbursement and size and all the basic. I mean, we can't deviate from that project that is put forward and will be voted on in October. That vote is essentially, at least in my experience, and I've been working with the MSBA since before its inception, to be honest. Those votes are essentially been worked out, and the staff works out the details, so those votes occur fairly pro forma. So once that vote occurs and the town then votes in November, they're going to vote a yes or no on the school building project, and the school building project that's in front of them, which is essentially the project we all know about. So if there's a yes vote, then it moves into meaning a yes vote at both town meeting and at the ballot. then it moves into the rest of the design process and into construction, and the project moves ahead, and that's it. And the MSBA stays involved, but more on a monitoring reimbursement basis, and not so much on a decisions around our project. If the vote fails in either the ballot or town meeting, then the project then is out of the MSBA system, because that's the project that's been approved by them. So the project then moves to essentially needs to reapply. And I'm not going to put words in the MSBA's mouth. I mean, they basically, the statement of interest we applied for, and I'm really not very good on details, so somebody can correct me, but I'm guessing this was probably 4 years ago at this point that we put the statement of interest in that brought us to this point. And so we have to reapply a statement of interest. There are some examples, like for instance, in Lincoln, where that's taken after a failed vote, that a new project has taken an awful long time. I don't know the number, but it's more than 5 years. And, so we would go through that process again and essentially start from scratch. We'd have to appropriate some amount of money for the feasibility phase, just like we did a few years ago. And we would start the process again, and a new building committee would, go through essentially what you've seen for the past 2.5 years or so, and come to a conclusion, and that they will have to come to their own conclusion. I'm not going to suppose what that may be. And that's the implication of a failed vote. What the MSBA does allow in a failed vote is within 120 days, you could revote substantially the same project. You can make some small adjustments. You could pull out things that they're not reimbursing, for instance, and they likely wouldn't, they would allow that to continue in a revote. So they do have a revote policy. You do have to sort of apply for it and sort of explain what you're going to do around a revote. But as I say, it's substantially the same project. It wouldn't be a new project at a new location, for instance. So I don't know if, I hope that does it. You can't really be definitive around the time frame around this, because to be honest, when you get into a statement of interest, it all depends on what other communities are putting their application in at the same time. I think when Medfield, typically, 15% of them get moved through the process once they apply. In Medfield's case, I think we applied, I know, at least twice, and I think even more than that. So, we would have to apply again. And if the community pool of needs was sufficiently small, I assume, we would move fairly quickly. If it's grown and is typical, we would have some time to work through that statement of interest process. Similar.
Tim, I heard some people say that if you were going to do the revote in 120 days, it needs to be close. Is that, do you have any idea what the definition of that is?
I think I don't know. I haven't heard that, Sharon, so I can't speak to what that particular, I don't know what they mean by close, but it needs to be substantially the same project. You can pull out, for instance, if we decided to go back with the same project, but not, some of the playground development of things that are outside, or say some of the work we're doing around the wheel lock parking arrangement to improve that. Like, for instance, they're not paying for that. That's way over the cap. It's not reimbursable. They would vote some of that, but it has to be substantially the same project.
Anybody else have questions on that?
Just to confirm my understanding, so if it failed, my understanding is the soonest that we could submit a new statement of interest would be next April. And then
I believe, yeah, I think that, I don't know whether they come out with a different schedule now and then, but I believe that's the schedule that's typically been, yeah.
And if that were the case, then it'd probably be another 2, maybe even 3 years before you get accepted into the program. And then if we have the same duration of time that it takes to go through the preliminary design, the schematic, and come up with where we are today, it could be another couple of years. And then if it was voted on at that time, at town meeting and approved, it would be another 2 or 3 years before the school is built. So we're talking that if this vote fails, the soonest we'd get a new school, regardless of where it is, would be somewhere around 2028, 2029. Is that correct?
I mean, I haven't done the math, so the way you laid it out is pretty much accurate in terms of, now, if we were to somehow, you know, impress people in the first statement of interest and the other communities that applied at that time didn't have needs, it's a very logical process they go through. They rate your project on like 9 factors. And if you have projects that when they rate, you know, if that candidate pool is weak for some reason, then you might get selected first. I'm not aware of a town that's had that happen to them, even on the first time, you know, even aside from a revote, even just on a project. The most of them that we've worked with, and probably that's been 24 communities at this point, they've applied multiple times to the MSBA, the statement of interest. So it you know, you don't want to put words in their mouth. So you don't want to say, well, it's 2 years. It could be 4 years, could be 1, you know, you might strike lightning and get in that first year. But as I say, that's not by any stretch typical.
Tim, you and I go back to the days of the high school and the middle school where we did have a revote, but the circumstances then were it passed town meeting but didn't pass the vote.
Right.
Right, and my recollection is that the vote was something like 50.5 versus 49.5 in terms of not passing.
Very
So
close.
that kind of met that criteria of being close and reviewed. But the decision to revote, is that at that time, I think it was the selectmen. Does it fall to the selectmen again?
So it's important to note, Bob, that the MSBA as currently constituted started in 2004. So when we, in the previous iteration of school building assistance, it wasn't called the MSBA. It is a completely different process. And it's a completely different process because of what towns were going through back when Medfield did. Back when Medfield applied, the staff of the MSBA was fairly minimal. There were a few people there. Now the staff is fairly significant and very engaged. And so what happened is towns would apply. They would actually build their projects ahead of time. You didn't have to go to the MSBA for any of this approval. You would submit the project, and if they said they're going to reimburse it, it could be 5 years into construction and they start reimbursing. So you had to carry the debt load for everything. It was a completely different in 2004, that the reform to school building assistance, which also created the 1 cent on your sales tax going to dedicated to the school building assistance program, which means it got much more heavily funded, and that became a much more organized process. That's not what we dealt with. So you really can't make any comparisons on a state building assistance level with what we went through 20 years ago. I don't know if does that answer your question?
But we're just doing the math. So your experience with the MSBA is 17 years?
Yes, I mean, actually, I worked with the MSBA when they were being set up because I was actively involved in a lot of construction reform and programs back then. So I worked with them really before they were set up.
Sounds like lucky you. Okay.
That's why I don't have any hair.
Okay. Do you guys have any more questions on that? Or else we'll move to, okay, so then our next kind of piece of this is that if this passes, I guess, the question is who can answer questions about the transfer process of it becoming a school to something else? We have 2 seats up here. Whoever would
Sharon,
like.
can I just have
Yeah.
one more question on this topic?
Yeah.
Probably Christine. Yeah. So what came up one of the things that came up last evening was the town meeting votes and it doesn't receive a supermajority. There is still a town election on Monday, the 15th,
Correct.
8 days after.
Yes.
Can you kind of clarify that a little bit? Because there was a question last night, well, why have a town vote if the,
We based it on scheduling, so you need a 35-day notification to the town clerk for the actual wording of the ballot question. So that's already in place now, and the Board of Selectmen will call the election by warrant at their next meeting. Once that starts, it will allow absentee voting for the election, which means you can't stop that process once it's put into place. The election still has to move forward. And it's seen as an independent event from the special town meeting.
so in the event, I shouldn't even ask this, but I will. In the event that it's a close vote, yeah, but it doesn't pass at the town meeting, and there's a subsequent vote, and it passes with a large number, would that be a basis for a re-examination of the 120 days? I guess it's a what if, but I mean, chance favors the prepared
I can't
mind.
answer the 120 days for MSBA. I can only answer what we can do on that.
Well, but it's 10 days of action and yeah, I mean, there's a possibility that could occur. That you'd have, as we saw in the past,
Right, you could
the
have
vote takes
two varying
different,
different.
takes different decisions. Okay. All right, so the second vote is important.
And I believe, Christine, don't get me wrong, that if you then called another town meeting, you wouldn't have to have another election. So imagine
That's
it
correct.
fails a town meeting 60-40, passes the ballot at 65-35 or some other number. And then the conclusion was, well, it's passed by a large number of people voting, let's take another shot at town meeting. You would just have to have another town meeting, you would not have to have another election.
Correct.
Thank you.
But we have to let them know, and Tim, we have to let them know within 10 days. I think we have to tell them, we intend to revote, and here's why we think the outcome might be different, right?
Right.
You have to have some basis to say, here's what will change in the interim, and why we think the outcome might, and then you have 120 days to actually do that. Is that right, Tim?
Yes, now, I don't know exactly the timing you have to get back to them, but you do have to get back to them with a plan and why you, and like you said, why you think it will be different the next time.
Who gets back to them, the SBC or the selectmen or?
It's probably through the owner's project manager and it's usually, it probably would be in this case, the selectmen. I think they're the applicant.
Says, I've been reading, I printed out the rule. It says, in the event that a school district fails to approve funding for a proposed project within the 120-day deadline, by no later than 10 business days following the failed vote, the school district must submit to the MSBA a plan that 1, presents the vote results, 2, explains the school district's understanding of the reasons for the failed vote, and 3, sets forth the school district's plan to remedy the failed vote and a suggested timeline for such remedy.
So maybe it's you, Jess.
Well, then I'm gonna lose my hair just like Tim.
Okay.
State possibility.
All right. Okay, do you guys wanna?
Oh, no.
Come sit closer to the
More than
owl.
the hot seat
All
right
right. The owl is friendly.
now. Yeah.
Very friendly.
We've learned that like if it's off into the far corners, it's hard to see.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yes, I guess our first question is, what is the process that you know of transferring the Dale Street School back to the town? Because I understand that it's not just,
it's not just like a check
yeah,
kind of thing. Do you want to, so Jeff and I met with our attorney on Monday to kind of discuss this and really make sure that we really understood what's going on. So we can transfer the property to you
me.
from, or I'm speaking in the large view. Although Sharon, if you would like it,
I wouldn't, but thank you.
all right.
It'd be a tremendous
So-
disc golf course.
Yes.
You just did your remark, right? So
So the school committee may transfer the property from the school committee, and I want to be very clear that the school committee has never had this on an agenda item at this point. I'm simply describing the process, but in no way am I speaking for all of our
Appreciate that.
members. There is a process which is set forth, and it's pretty specified in the Mass General laws. It's MGL 4015A, which is a very basic step kind of thing. Essentially, what we need to do is we must vote to declare that the property is no longer needed for educational purposes, which obviously would happen once the other school opened, if that would be, or at some time in the future. I mean, depending on what as we process through as a town, and I assume that we would be very much working in close association around what it is that as a town and a school we need. So, and then we would say that we no longer needed it for educational purposes. And that's just a simple majority on our part, just almost everything. And then we have to send a notice to the selectmen. And let's see, what's the second part of
Go
this?
on the annual or special town meeting.
Right, so then we have to call an annual or special town meeting and have it as a warrant article on there. And then correct me if I am wrong, but through those kind of negotiations around, you know, what you guys want and whether you guys, meaning the town, you know, because we do have to transfer it to you. And if we decertify it, the town has to then accept it. And that is done through town meeting. And if I remember correctly, please.
2/3 vote.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I can't even bake things with 2/3 right now. But yes, it would be a 2/3 vote at town meeting to accept it. So even if the selectmen said, yeah, it's a great idea, and you know, Warrant Committee said, yeah, it's a great idea, it still ends up being within the hands of the legislative body of the town. So, I mean, there's certainly more nuances in some ways than just that, but that is essentially the process. And it wouldn't necessarily happen until we were quite sure, you know, we had kids out, that we really could essentially decommission it as a school, that it was no longer necessary for educational purposes. Or the town could decide, and well, we could decide that we would like to continue to hang on to it because within our conversations, you know, we have concerns about whether there's a 700 property, you know, something other happening at the hospital and we need to hang on to the swing space or whatever those things are. So it's not necessarily, it really is a group decision in that we all talk about it as we have about virtually everything. But then in the end, it does end up being a decision of the town legislature, which is the all town meeting. So is that, are there any specific questions around that? I'm happy to send you the
Yeah, we have a
The
legal
MDL
opinion
itself.
on it, all the detail and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, if you want to just, you can just send us a copy.
Sure.
It fascinates me. So like, so basically, if you guys voted for it and the selectmen voted to accept it, and then if the town didn't do 2/3 to do it, then it.
And then we have
And
like a
empty.
really enormous hot potato in our lap
Yeah.
and we figure out what to do with it, right? So, I mean, essentially, you know, if we think about it, it's all the same pot, right? It's not like all of a sudden you,
Do we know which person in which century made this law? I'm sorry.
I bet you I could find it if I wanted to, but
So in terms of the school, let's say under a scenario that you just explained, and it's anticipated that a new building would come on board in September 2024.
Mhm.
Obviously, that would be the time when you would commence the release of the building.
Right.
But with uncertainties, would you be able to use the building or provide use to the building while it's still a school, but not being used as a school?
to that, I will leave Dr. Marsden to give his opinion, because again, we have not had this on an agenda and we have not deliberated in
No, I
any
guess
way, shape or
I'm
form,
just,
so.
I'm wondering how. that-
Yeah, I think one of the options you would have as a school district would be to keep the care and custody of that building and control of that, and then rent it out or something, to another
So that
entity.
would be an option.
And it would
That
have to
could be
be an
an option.
educational.
You're not
right?
restricted from saying it's a school, so we can't use it for any other purpose, but it would still say under. I mean, obviously complexities, negotiations.
It would have to be an
Who respects
educational.
responsibilities, et cetera, but that is an option.
Yeah, I'm not clear on the educational piece. I think we might have a little more flexibility, but I'd have to double check that. But that is an option. We could own that and, use it for, daycare or,
Right.
whatever.
That's
we
kind of what I
wanted
mean.
to-
Income producing, yeah.
Yeah, so you could,
And as far as what you guys can do, you being the town, again, not splitting for any particularly great reason, just to make sure that we're kind of know what the transfer of property is. Am I reading here that we need to, I'm sorry, I do not have the good glasses on right now. We transfer it and then I think and it might be that our town charter or whatever the mission of the property itself is in the way that we were granted the property. I think it would have to be used for some sort of municipal purpose to some
Well, I
extent,
mean,
but I don't know.
specifically, we have the discussion this evening about the park and rec.
Right.
so
right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
If in 2024, it was still the property of the school,
mhm,
would there be an opportunity to, wait a minute, I can't, not a yes or no, but would this, it seems there might be an opportunity that you could lease it to the town for the use of the park and rec or something.
That's correct.
that is correct.
Yeah, that's part of our opinion that we got.
So, I mean, it's both simple and a little difficult as anything with, bringing something to town meeting and really being able to educate people around it. Is.
I guess the one question that we have that we haven't really looked into yet, which we will in the next couple of years, based on what we need to do, is that what happens at that town meeting if the 2/3 vote doesn't happen and the town doesn't accept it?
Right.
So that's something we need to look at, if that's a scenario, but that wasn't part of our discussion with our attorney, but we need to look at that as well. But I would assume it would just stay in the care of the school department, but
Right, and then again, everything,
Yeah, all of that's very
We're all
complex.
Yeah.
big,
Right.
yeah, we're one big happy
Talk about not
family,
using the school, it gets into-
Right.
and it's all within the same pot, yeah,
You get the warrant committee involved, it'll get complex.
maybe we run into that.
Maybe I will be on the warrant committee when that.
I will be selling hair regrowth treatments at that point. So that's, that's essentially the process. more than
Okay.
anything. All right,
All right.
any questions you guys have?
There's no obligation to have a plan for it when we are supposed to accept it as the town, right? Like, ideally, there would be a plan as to.
Yeah,
Right.
ideally, the way that we
Ideally,
do
we should
everything
do that.
is that we try to put a plan together, but I guess technically, we could just convene a meeting and say, we don't want it anymore, and then that would trigger some sort of process, but clearly that's not how we work here, right?
Well,
I mean,
I guess I would also say, if the process is you have to decide you don't need it anymore, you would need to know whether or not it's gonna be at school anymore. So you couldn't do that.
you can't do that yet.
Can't do it yet, yeah.
Yeah.
And the side of the town, obviously, would be, if you bring it to the town to vote, and they say, we want you to take responsibility for this building, then we're gonna get into all the discussions of renovation and bring it
Capital
up to
plan.
speed. And so that, as I said, it's very, very complex. So I was just curious. Now, my question was only, is that possible?
Right.
There's a lot of issues in front of that.
Is there, not that we would do this, but is there any restriction on demolishing it, either before or after it gets transferred? There's no issues around that.
I think that's town charter, but I wouldn't think so. I do know that in the most vague way possible about what I know about the town charter and the land itself is that I think it's required to be used as municipal land in one way or another. Or is that
That's our
just the
next- Well,
fact?
that's our next question, but probably a different person needs to sit in the.
That's
owl
exactly
seat.
right, yeah. Is there some sort of like owl dismissal we do or?
I was gonna say, because I'm gonna end up flip-flopping you a little bit unless we wanna, I know we have another question for you guys.
We have something on, you want to do the pre-K.
Well, I was gonna say, while they're sitting in the owl seats, do you
Yeah.
wanna flip to another question?
Yeah, so we have this question here on what information is available on the potential of I think this might have come up last night, but the potential Massachusetts mandate for pre-K, full day K.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
One that we have thought about for
Yeah.
years and years and both dreaded and looking forward to.
So I would say that over 96% of kindergarten kids in Massachusetts are in full day kindergarten. So 305 communities have tuition-free full day at this point. There's only 38 communities of districts that serve 47 communities that collect tuition for it. So essentially, it's almost mandated as it is now. And I think what we've always talked about, and I know I've talked with Mike Sullivan about it, and I talked with Christine about it as well, is that it's a pretty big investment to go to no tuition. So that would be something that would really impact our operating budget. So we've continued to do the tuition route. And that's served us well because we're able to offset teacher salaries with that. So that, but I don't see anything down the pike in terms of mandating it, because essentially when you have almost 96.4, I think, last year, percent of kids in the state already in full day kindergarten, and they're not going to expend energy to make it mandated when it's almost already happening. In terms of pre-K, I know that came up last night. I know that's something the Biden administration is looking at. I know I was pessimistic about it last night. That hasn't changed. So if when it happens, I'll believe it. That's a really expensive endeavor for the country and the state to take on. So
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it'd be something that is needed. In my former district, we had universal preschool and for all 3 and 4-year-olds, but it was tuition based. So we're able to do it, and we have the space, which is the key piece. So, I mean, I think it's important educationally. It's great for our society. I'm just not sure it's ever going to happen mandated at no cost for communities.
Right, that's part of it. If we knew that it was gonna be paid, we would figure it out, I
We'd figure it
suspect. We would figure it out in a second and open up, but that has never actually been the case for anything, at least in Medfield for the most part, so. We're just in this funny niche. But I can't predict that either. We've been looking. And we'll continue to keep an eye on it. And quite frankly, our professional associations and our, kind of MSBA or the MASC continues to look at it. And, Chris Martis worked strategies for early childhood education. And that's a group that does it, but we just haven't seen.
Yeah, any
anything
information you want on
definitive.
that, if you Google strategies for children,
Right,
it's a Boston-based nonprofit. As Jess said, Chris Martis used to be the superintendent here many years ago and has done some interim work with us over the last few years. He's the former CEO of that, does some consulting with them now, but even DESE uses all their information because it's just such a big topic. They do all the research briefs, they do all the research town by town, so their website's loaded with a lot of information.
but they don't have anything out there right now that is flagged saying, this is imminent or we have it in a year. And it's, it's
I
really about
tried to
advocacy.
Google, I didn't really find much.
So, yeah, just a lot of uncertainty, which is kind of the only reality is change, right?
Yeah, right.
And I keep saying it, it's true. We can't know, we pin things down to the extent that we can, but there's always going to be a level of uncertainty in almost everything.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I thought I would play Captain Obvious for today.
And I want to get that number. Was it 37 communities have tuition kindergarten out of 3?
It's 38, I wrote it down here. So 38 school districts serving 47 communities have tuition. And as of last year, Concord Public Schools was the only district that did not offer full day kindergarten in the state. Needham was part of that group for a while, but they added it last year, like the year before.
Whenever New Orleans opened.
Right, that's when they added it.
Right, and every district continues to be required to have free half day. Is that correct?
Correct.
We're required,
That's
yes.
mandated.
So we do have 2 half-day classrooms.
I mean, I think the biggest issue around full day kindergarten, if the state were to mandate it, is they'd have to adjust their Chapter 70 formula to account for all those kindergarten kids. Because right now, when we get that October 1, we
Right.
send that number out to them, they
That's-
count the kindergarten students as a half a child. Because it's only mandated half day, right? So that'd have to be encompassed into the Chapter 70 calculation to make that a whole child. And that's gonna cost them a lot of money.
Although if you've ever spent a lot of time with a 5-year-old, no, you know that is a 1.5 child. Right?
Great.
So, but It is what it is, and, you know, we crunch numbers the way we crunch numbers, and that's how that comes out. You know, chapter 70 has always been kind of a bugaboo in terms of how they try to fix it. So,
Okay.
other questions, crystal balls, anything,
All right,
lottery
good.
numbers?
Lottery numbers would be helpful.
If I come up with them, you don't know them.
We'll let you relinquish your owl seats.
Oh, I'm
I'll be
sorry.
back.
You'll be back. You can temporarily relinquish, and I think that we're gonna ask Mr. Marcucci and Ms. Trewiler to take an owl seat. I know, we've never done this before. It's like, come forward.
We might do this at the selectmen's meetings now.
I don't think anyone wants to be this close to us.
Too funny. All right, so as just alluded to, we keep hearing there's rules about the Dale and the Bath sites, and we did post as our fact documents some really old deeds from like 1914 that Christine found for us. So I think our main question is, what can we use that for?
Municipal purposes.
What does that mean?
Any sort of town government function that would fall under the Board of Selectmen.
Or the schools.
Well, yes, that's schools.
So when people talk about like senior housing, does that fall into?
I think it would depend on how you set up the structure for that. You know, if there was a leasing arrangement with the land and the town retained the land, then I think we could look into that.
Yeah, I think if the, for example, if the Affordable Housing Trust owned the land
Yes.
and leased it to a developer, I mean, the trust charter, it's not limited to affordable housing as defined by the state. So it's kind of broader charter than that. I think that would probably be the legal way to do it. If the trust owned the land, lease the land to the developer who would be building the project, that would probably fall within the municipal use of municipal agency serving a approved municipal purpose. I don't think you could sell it in fee simple to somebody to do whatever they want.
Yeah, we would have to retain control of it.
I suspect that because there are a lot of trusts like that, and one of the purposes of having it is to have an entity that can own land for that purpose. So that's my
And-
semi-educated opinion. Is not a legal opinion. But that is
In both buildings, the FAP and the Dale, it's similar. Use, so there's no distinction. It's municipal use for both, right? Okay.
it's that whole piece of land.
It's the whole piece.
Yeah.
And it's named for Hannah Adams fact. Hannah Adams fact.
Does it always have to be named for him? Like,
It does.
I did. say
Yes,
that.
Yeah.
and it actually says that any building erected on the site should be suitable for her name, and I'm not so sure, no
I'm not
offense.
sure.
I'm not so sure the facts really holding up their end of the bargain on that, but just saying. Right.
Okay. All right. Well, that one was easy.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty straightforward. Okay.
All right.
You can relinquish your hours.
Thank you.
This
Thank you very much.
is so weird.
See you next week.
For this one, I feel like we need a third owl seat because I think we will talk about park and rec next since I work, but since Mr. Weber here was nice enough to come at the last minute because Mr. Quinlan is doing his actual day job in Ashland and anyways, you can. I was gonna say, we can fit, there you go. There you go. You guys wanna come
As long as you're close enough, just to make sure the microphone, since we don't have any outside microphones, the owl will pick it up.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll just say thank you for coming. And I think that I will say, so I guess we'll say participating in person.
Kevin Ryder, Director of Park and Rec.
Mel Seabold, Park and Rec Commission.
And we have another commissioner on Zoom.
Rob Tatro, Commissioner.
Nice to meet you. So, I don't, who wants to, do you wanna Anybody want to just jump in?
Do you want to just, so Kevin and I spoke about this earlier, so Kevin,
Yeah.
you just want to jump in, you've got the outline, but I mean, essentially what we wanted to do was get a picture of kind of like what your current, I guess your current program and just a summary of Park and Rec for now. And then how you kind of view it over the horizon over the next couple of years and contemplating whether the vote passes or not. Just kind of walk us through the vision and kind of where you are right now.
Yeah, we feel like everybody's been talking about you, and then maybe you should have a chance to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
Have my own voice. So there's a lot there. We are, so we're a fee-based program. So that's the first and foremost. A lot of the numbers you asked for were pre-COVID and some of that's already up on the website. In the last full fiscal year that we offered programs before COVID, we had almost 8,800 participants in our programs. Now that isn't individual participants. Some people might have multiple programs that they participated in, but we had 8,800 registrations. 860 of those were non-residents. So almost 8,000 just residential residents. Our revenues, I sent you guys a sheet earlier. Our revenues from fiscal year 2014 to fiscal year 2019 almost doubled. And that's in without adding any additional space. Using the space that we currently have with the FAP Center and our fields. We topped out at, I don't have the figure in front of me, but I think it was, in the $775,000 range as far as the last pre-COVID year that we had revenues was in that range. And we were well on pace for that again before COVID hit. We were having one of our most successful years up to that point before COVID hit. So $740,000 was our fiscal year 2019. That obviously took a dip fiscal year 20 with COVID. And then this past year, as we started to get back into the groove and started to be able to open up a little bit more, we saw those revenues jump up. And our summer camp this past summer, 8 weeks of summer camp, and we had our busiest summer ever, which is a testament to both our staff and the amount of planning that we do and kids that we bring in to work those camps.
It's very impressive. It was like, it's almost like $200,000 in 1 month, July. Is that?
That is correct. That is correct. Now, some of that is front loaded because a lot of people didn't start registering until they knew how we could offer it, how it was going to be run. And we kind of did a different way of registering this past summer where everyone that registered as a $50 deposit. And then once we knew how we had to offer camp and what we had to charge, everyone then got charged that full amount after that. So some of that would have been spread out over a few months, but it was still, 198,000 in June and 191,000 in July. That's true, almost $400,000 in just 2 months.
Yeah.
And you had wait lists, right, Kevin?
We did
You had
have,
wait lists,
yeah.
So you weren't even taking on all the.
Yeah, so one of the things we're allowed to do, one of the things that we're able to do, so we run camp at the FAP Center. As has been mentioned multiple times over multiple years, not the nicest building that the town owns. On top of that, in cooperation with the school committee and Dr. Marsden and the school department, we're allowed to use Dale Street as well. Inside Dale Street, we're allowed or we use the cafeteria and the gymnasium. Mainly because the classrooms are taken by the teachers and their rooms are set up for them. And I don't want to be the one to have to tell one of the teachers that their room got messed up. So off limits there, cafeteria, gymnasium, we work with Principal Grenham and the custodians there to make sure that they're able to do what they need to do to open up school in September while we're still there. Using that space, and that probably goes back about 4 or 5 years ago. Using that space helped us open up our camps. We had wait lists, and when we had a conversation with the school committee and Dr. Marsden, it was trying to fill a need that the schools already filled during the school year, and we're just taking on that responsibility in the summer. It was a natural fit there. Even with that, we still had wait lists this summer. Kids that we couldn't take into camp, and it had nothing to do with staff. I make note that a lot of my colleagues in the Metro West could not run camp like we ran camp this summer because they did not have adequate staff. We were extremely fortunate to have not just an abundance of staff, but a solid staff to run our camps this summer. That allowed us to do what we were able to do this summer, where a lot of colleagues in neighboring towns either couldn't run camp or could not run camp at the capacity that we ran camp. If we had more space, we could have taken more kids, and it was space, and also space at some of the locations we take field trips. They were only allowing so many kids to come to a field trip, and only allotting us so much space, only so many buses that we could take, and so on and so forth. So space both physically here at camp and space physically at locations we will take field trips limited us this year, or else we could have seen, you know, a couple dozen more kids a week easily. And the wait list we had, and I talked about this with the commission, the wait list we had isn't a true representation of the wait list that we potentially could have had, because there's a number of families that contacted us about registering for camp that when we said we're full and it doesn't look good to take more, they didn't go on a wait list. They opted for other options outside of us. So we definitely, I mean, you know, we had almost 1,600 summer camp registrations this year, which was far and away more than we've ever had.
So
Kevin,
Karen,
sorry, go ahead.
how many on the wait list?
I can get you those numbers. I would say on average, between our camps, between 12 and 15 kids per week on a wait list. So over an 8-week period, about 100 kids that we couldn't take.
And then what about your utilization in the slow months? Are you getting wait lists during that time, or what's
Yeah.
what's your utilization?
Yeah, no, we see a lot of our popular programs, we see wait lists. We try and work with those. One of them, just to give an example, we run a micro soccer clinic for 3 and 4 year olds on Saturday mornings. We use kids that work for us in the summer, high school, this year just happened to be high school girls, that work for us in the summer, come back in the fall, and on Saturday mornings help run this program. It filled up within a couple hours when we first offered it, and going back and trying to get more kids to come help us work that, so we had adequate staff. We were able to satisfy those wait lists, but we had on just that class, I mean, we had like 50 something kids on the wait list of 3 and 4 year olds wanting to play soccer. Our popular programs, if it's our Neshoba tubing trip, our ski club, kids night out when we're in movie nights, so like popular events that attract a lot of kids, that's usually the ones that we see our big wait lists on. But some of them also become these programs where we can only literally take 12 or 15 kids, and we have 20 to 30 kids wanting to take that class. We just physically can't take them because of the space.
Can you talk a little about what programs you offer for like these preschool age kids that happen during the school day that you're trying to do in the FAF, and how that could change if you had a different building?
So if we had a different space, we'd be able to offer. So one of the things we're hampered by is not hampered's the wrong word. We rent space to the Medfield after school program. So their utilization of the FAF center during the school day, for their setup and getting themselves ready for the kids when they come from Dale after school, we're kind of maybe 1 or 2 rooms inside our building that we can use on a regular basis during the day until school gets out, so that we're not interfering with any of their time to get themselves ready. I mean, we offer anything from mini musicians, drawing classes, mommy and me classes, soccer class, like soccer and multi-sport classes, anything that parents are interested in getting their kids either active or stimulated for enrichment classes, are things that we're able to offer. A lot of that right now is happening outside, both because of instructors that are currently not wanting to teach because of COVID indoors, and just our ability to be able to run these outside when it's nice out, and kind of take advantage of some of that nice weather.
I know I was looking at this program report that you ran for the, I guess the period, the non-COVID period, the most recent non-COVID period, January 19 to February 2020. And there's like $800,000 of revenue, you know, that was sort of a high peak of a non-COVID period.
Yeah.
And then, but there's like 2 columns here, residential and then non-residential. So there's actually, I didn't realize this, but there's people from other towns attending your program.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where do they come from? Do you know? I'm just curious.
Typically, it's neighboring towns, Millis, Westwood, Norwood, Natick. We've gone as far as Norfolk out that way. A lot of times it's because of a program we're offering that isn't offered in their town. Sometimes it's honestly that we are offering more than other towns are offering, so they're looking to us. And it also comes, they have family in town, so like a cousin or someone is taking the class, word of mouth gets to them and they jump in on it with us.
There's a lot of programs you do.
Thank you, yeah.
Kevin, the staff is, in the summer, is it primarily students from Medfield?
I would say over the last couple of summers, 99.7% are. I mean, I think I had one or two that were not Medfield residents.
Because I always think of Park and Rec, for the younger kids, but that's a great program for the kids in high school coming up.
Absolutely. I mean,
participating, it's really terrific.
We are, unofficially, we are probably the largest employer of kids during the summer, seasonal employment. I think this past summer, 85 kids between summer camps, the swim pond, and our field maintenance staff were on board this summer.
That's good.
Yeah. I think I knew all 85 names, which took as a badge of honor for myself.
That's good.
I think that leads into some of the questions around what are your expenditures? I know we talk about this in the warrant
Yeah.
committee, right? So we've gone through this
Yeah.
before, but I think for purposes of this discussion, if you can kind of walk us through your expenditures, does it create a profit for you? What does that picture look like?
Yeah, so our expenditures a lot, our big expenditure, which should come as no surprise, is staffing. So staffing the program, staffing the camps, staffing the pond, and anything else that we're doing. That is the largest percentage of what we do. On top of that, it's program costs. So program costs could be buses for a field trip, supplies for a class, anything that would need to be done for the program to be successful. Anything that we would need for our summer camps, for the swim pond, for the fields, to get those up to par and make them, what we believe to be above standard places for kids to recreate. On top of that, some of the funds that we generate from our programs help cover any shortages where electric or utility bills come into play, where we do get money from the town as part of our operating budget, but it doesn't cover the full amount that we have to expend. So our programs generate revenues for that, maintenance on our fields, any upkeep on our fields or restoration we need to do to the fields. Our fields get used a lot. We do have some of the nicer fields in the area, and they get used by Medfield a lot, and they become a popular place for teams to practice and play games and whatnot. With that, we also have expanded some of that. So I know this is getting off topic a little bit, but we participate in a field hockey league that never happened before. That takes divots out of our fields and more usage out of our fields. As lacrosse programs grow, soccer programs grow, baseball programs grow, more uses on the field. So we're constantly funding repairs and restorations on our fields. Those are like the days that people don't see when they're not on the fields, where we're going out and slice seeding or overseeding or putting down fertilizer or whatever needs to be done, cutting patches of the infield so that the dips that the kids kick don't become short hops that go to the face. Little things like that we're always taking care of. So the money we generate helps fund those. On top of that, revenues help fund our capital budget. The capital budget items that we've come before the town for, we've been funding those through our revenue generated out of the Park and Rec programs, camps, and activities.
Before you get past the fields, just for
Yeah.
perspective, when you say our fields, which ones are yours?
Yeah, which ones are mine, which ones are yours? So our fields.
Yes.
So we have care and custody of the baseball and lacrosse fields at Metacomet, and the tennis courts at Metacomet, and all the playing fields at McCarthy Park. So a multi-use field, a lacrosse / multi-use field, 4 Little League Diamonds, 2 softball fields at McCarthy.
So the soccer field that we lock are not.
Are nothing to do with me. Send your complaints elsewhere.
But just to clarify, Ken, so the maintenance of the Medicom at the McCarthy Park, the tennis courts are all absorbed in your budget?
For the most part, there is some money in our operating budget that goes towards maintenance. But it doesn't cover the amount of maintenance that we
No, but
actually.
I know we get, you have an amount that's from
From the town.
But
Above and beyond that,
within that and the money you generate, you cut, so the town doesn't have a category that says our maintenance for Medicom. or
Correct.
our maintenance, yeah,
Correct.
that's
Yep.
insignificant.
Yep. and on top of that, we also take care of the grounds at the public safety building, town hall, the library, Meeting House Pond, Baxter Park,
Lowell Mason.
Lowell Mason House, Historical Society.
As it works, right, you're not volunteering to have that.
Not volunteering to do that.
Okay.
No,
Just what
No.
Take that off everybody.
I'm just going through them all in my head, the
Okay.
ones that we take care
Voluntold.
of. Voluntold.
But I think it's important to understand that within the budget or within what you spend, it's covering operating costs that would otherwise be
A town.
some of the town, or
Mhm.
taken by the town.
Yep.
I think that's clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's important.
Yeah. And as far as I know, on the agenda for today was what the profit that we help generate. The way I've always assumed or kind of gone about our programs is it's about a 20% profit, but that profit goes back, that's going back into those maintenance costs that we do, goes back into supplies that we can do to upgrade our camps, upgrade our programs. Recently, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've had to buy new computers, new telephone system. We've had to replace whatever else that's come up. And we dip into that because we're thankfully, as Steve mentioned, we've had a very robust revolving account that generated by these programs.
Capital expenditures.
Yeah, we mentioned that, the capital expenditures, yeah, we're waiting to get a new van that was earmarked at town meeting, but since vans can't be found anywhere, we are still
You and
waiting.
the chip problem?
The chip problem, so.
Oh, boy. Well, I'll just say that's really impressive that you can do so much in by far the best building in town. And
It's funny, not to sidetrack it, but someone was in the building today picking up a child and was asking about some things in the building and they were talking about the windows. And I said, the windows are the newest thing in this building, like, give me a little bit of a break on what's going on here, so. We have an old building for sure, and we've been noticing new, let's call them issues or new little marks happening in our building. So our floor is warping in some areas, and noticed that because during camp, someone kicked a soccer ball and, you know, it hit me in the face. So I looked and said, that can't be, oh, okay, there it is. There's a little lip in the floor.
maybe you guys can talk a little bit about, so a few years ago, you did a feasibility study.
Mhm.
And I know you've been working with that with the permanent building committee. So Mike and Tim are now gonna put on their permanent building committee hats instead. Like maybe you guys can talk a little bit about why you did the feasibility study, what that would change to your programs and kind of where you guys are at that, so.
Why don't you talk about
Yeah.
why?
So in let me get my dates straight. 2017, we had a feasibility study, a financial feasibility study. We contracted with a consultant, Hunden out of Chicago, Illinois. And what they were tasked to do was find out if we could financially support a new recreation center in Medfield. Could the programs that we perceive that we could run, could they financially support in a new rec center? Could a new rec center generate revenue and help potentially support a portion of that funding towards a new building? I've been on record to say that I felt that what they gave as their estimates for revenue that we would do were ultra conservative. And I say that because what they said we do in year one of a new building I was currently doing that year in the old building. So their financial forecast was a little conservative. But they showed a steady increase over a 5 to 7 year plan, I think it was, Mike.
Yeah.
Where they kind of showed an increase in how the programs would go. I would say it's right in line with the increase that on that sheet of as our revenues were going up until COVID hit. As far as how we were progressing. Every time I met with our board or our commission and would go over our financials, and they would look at me like, how did you increase more? Like, where are you getting this? Where are we getting this? How is this happening? And we don't know. There's no answer. We just run a good program with good staff and put out a good product that people want to be a part of. And the proof is in those kind of financial reports.
It strikes me when I look at this study they did back in 2017. They had a 10-year projection of revenue back then. And they projected that by year 8, it would be at 800,000 programming revenue. He did that last year.
Yeah.
We had asked them initially, Hunden, to be extremely conservative in their figures, so,
I guess.
Mission accomplished.
yeah.
So when they did this feasibility study, did they give you a projected P&L? So you'd have 800 in revenue in year 8, and what would be the bottom line? How much would go towards the debt for the building?
Sure, I think it was still in line with 20% that we were working off of as far as we try to kind of give you a sense of where I'm getting the 20% from. We try and be very financially prudent as far as we don't overcharge on our programs. So you might see in other towns or other recreational facilities where a class that we're offering, just to say at $99 might be $149 or $199 elsewhere. We're going to stay at $99 because we know that that's fiscally responsible as far as what families can afford and sending kids in. And we get families, and I use that plural, that sign up throughout the year for stuff, and then we see them all summer because of not just financially that we're affordable, but we're providing a superior product for that price as well. So could we charge more? Sure. Would we still get the same registrations? Maybe not, because we're an option that is fiscally responsible and is financially doable for families.
But did they conclude that you could support a new building? Because you said that was the purpose of the feasibility.
Yep, they concluded, and again, this is going back 4+ years now. And I've stated this as even today, we could partially help fund a new building, but we could not fully support a new building. But we could help pay towards debt service of a new building. And we would be able to do that in perpetuity, like that wouldn't go away when the 20 or 30 year note is up. That would be a fund that could be for ongoing maintenance or capital improvements or whatever needs to be done, so that money would still be coming through those programs. That wouldn't stop just because the bond gets paid off.
But the cost of a new building back when they did this 4 years ago was what? Was it?
So we went with PM&C to do based on the square footage that Hunden came up with, as far as what a new building would look like.
Right.
They came up with in 2017 $13.1 million for a new recreation zone, brand new recreation zone, not a rehab of a building or anything like that.
If we assume like 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
Say another 20% we'd add to that, I guess.
So just to clarify though, the Hunden report was funded by Park and Rec solely.
Yep.
So after that was done, that's when the building committee got involved, the current building committee got involved, and we got appropriations from the town to actually do a feasibility study with an architect locally. To do a similar study, basically that, we understood, not that the report from Hunden was bad, it was just, hey, let's do this on the up and up. The town I think that was probably 18 we got at a town
18 or 19. That we
So
got
at
that.
town meeting in 18, I want to say, we had money appropriated to do another feasibility study. We interviewed architects, we hired advocates, and they put together a similar, after multiple meetings and, knowing Park and Rec's needs, they put together basically a similar type study, that obviously, I mean, they're pretty good architects, but they came up with a really nice, big building at Hospital Hill. So there's multiple feasibility studies done. One, Park and Rec did on their own.
Yeah.
We kind of use that as a somewhat basis of like, hey, these are some of the needs, but really we had meetings.
Yeah.
And we talked about, what a new building would be. And that cost figure was much more than that.
What was that? Do you remember?
Hundreds,
15.
No, hundreds is 13.1. That was the PMP. I don't think
That was
Abacus
a
is,
larger building. We cut.
well, their original building
Yeah.
included a indoor soccer field,
Right.
which was another $8 million. And then, we took that out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was,
But I don't think Abacus is at, I don't think we've actually got numbers to that as far as.
yeah, they had a rough budget.
They were rated.
It was 18 million, 17 million.
Yeah,
you know,
15 to 18.
I can't.
And that was
remember.
done in 2018?
No,
No,
that's still ongoing.
it's still on.
So we still have funds appropriated to Abacus.
We're still working with Abacus. It was put on, we had a public forum in January of 2020, and then the world stopped. So
Okay,
we were progressing forward with scenarios for a building at the Dale Street location and a building at the hospital location.
so that's still on hold.
That's still, we're working with them, still meeting with them, but it was put on hold for almost a year, over a year.
And candidly, from our perspective, we also, talked to Kevin and the board and we said, hey, look, we've got this school project coming. So, we do all recognize the need here. But it was of something, look, I want to work with them to get it done and get something that they can use, but, we kind of had those conversations in the open, in the private, that said, hey, look, there's still a school building that we got approved by MSBA at that point. So we said, we probably have this really large bill coming, or hopefully have from the town. So throwing another, doesn't matter, $5 to $20 million on top of that for another building, may not be in the best, make the sense for the town. So we were just, it was more of there was no directive to say stop. It was more of a, hey, maybe we take a breath on this for a second.
So in the capital budget, the 5-year forecast, there's like a $15 million.
Yeah, there's like a 15.
I guess it's between 13 and 18.
Yeah.
so-
Right.
Yeah.
And there's, the reality is the numbers, it depends, you could. Could really build, slab on grade building for much.
Yeah, no, I
less.
just
Yeah,
want to
it's
understand
not-
like the history of where they came up with these numbers.
Yeah, so I
Kevin,
think it was
that
kind of
last,
in the
that
middle.
last meeting, which was in January 2020, as I recall,
Mhm.
I think, I know I was at a meeting.
Yep.
Where the posters were up and the.
Yep, that was it.
consultant using that. And it seemed that, and again, it's not scientific, but the preference was, in one of those scenarios, was that Park and Rec would be in town center versus because of its accessibility.
Correct. And it's the preference of both myself and the commission because of the proximity to Hinkley Pond, to be quite honest. Our summer camp goes there every single day and we walk there. If we were to build up at Hospital Hill, we now have to find transportation every single day to bring the kids from Hospital Hill. And we're talking 200 kids every single day. So
So
it's
the
not,
Dale Street location for Park and Rec is good for, I think actually.
it's a good fit.
But the school that's on Main Street was a preferred spot.
I mean, that would be, the one next door would be, that would be ideal, but with that not being available, the Dale Street location is, where we currently are is the preferred spot.
Can you guys talk a little bit about, I know it was, I know Mike Quinlan talked about it a bit last night, just because there ended up being a bunch of questions about Dale at the meeting last night. Can you guys maybe talk a little bit about kind of where you are on thoughts, maybe Mike and Tim from a permanent building committee standpoint on?
Sure. In regards to Park and Rec
Yeah.
specifically, because obviously it's a town decision on
Right.
kind of what happens to Dale. if this vote passes, right?
Well, and
So-
clearly the town meeting has to vote to take it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of steps that obviously have to happen, but obviously it's still an option. And Tim, you can probably help me with this, but there's really multiple options that we could do with the building, but in regards to Park and Rec, the space that Kevin and his group uses now, so the cafeteria, the 1969 one, basically. It's about 20,000 square feet, just under that, for that wing itself, as well as, so let's assume that the town's, hypothetically, this is what the Park and Rec's gonna do, and Mike, last night stated for a short term, maybe 8 to 10 years, whatever that number is. We can use this building for Park and Rec. What do we need to do? In order to make that building usable for them. So the space that was, that we intend to say this probably would be best fit for them is the space they currently use. There's a commercial kitchen there, the 1969 one. So that cafeteria, those classrooms that are about 800 square feet apiece, as well as the gym. So there's lots of areas in the building that would not be used by Park and Rec, but so those could be used for other things or not. So generally speaking, Mike was throwing out numbers of less than $2 million. So last night is what you heard to the meeting. Really what ends up happening, and Tim, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, please. So basically, the use group of the building is basically determines what codes and how you use the building. You'd have to change the use group of at least a portion of the building from educational to business. The gym would remain assembly because it is an assembly space now. In order to kind of make it code compliant for use, the 1969 wing, we would need to install sprinklers throughout that area, so fire sprinklers, as well as the 2-hour rated partitions, which is basically double-sided sheetrock. Two sets of sheetrock is 2-hour rated. You would need to do that in between kind of the entranceway into the 1969 wing, as well as the exit on the other side towards the library of the 1969 wing. So as well as some other general construction area, but we're talking to Abacus because they're still kind of on our payroll in regards to the feasibility study. We had them look at some numbers and tell us what needed to be done. That was their recommendation. So really, what does it make? What can we do at an absolute bare bones minimum to use this? And that would be it. Sprinklers, some fire rated walls, use group change of the building or part of the building. And it certainly can be done for less than $2 million. Tim, is that kind of how you read that?
No, I that's totally accurate. I think Mike, you did a great job with that. I think the only thing that we would need to do more, and that's why they actually obviously they quoted a number quite a bit less, but what we do need to figure out is what deferred maintenance, might need to be done in those that isn't part of that separation. But I think $2 million would be very much the high end of what could be done to essentially double the space of Park and Rec and give them a gym, an ability to have a gym. So, that has always been, I think, as has been pointed out here, like a kind of a positive solution for the Dale Street School. And I think that the study that Abacus did just sort of helped support that.
Generally speaking, Park and Rec is in 8,500 square feet now. And that new footprint that I just described in the 1969 wing is 19,400 square feet. Does that include that gym? Tim, I didn't read that.
What? What
The
was that?
19,400 square feet of doubling the space, does that include the gymnasium?
I have it up here in my computer. Let me just see.
I think it does, Mike. I think the another 40.
Yeah, the gym's another
4,600.
46.
Yeah, it does. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, they frame it as when combining the 1969 wing and the primary entrance connector, which I believe is the gym, this footprint is approximately 19,400. So I'm not positive about that. We'd have to clarify that with them.
Those are kind of we've highlighted that would work for Park and Rec, would double their space, would be.
So Kevin, you think it doesn't include it, or?
I think the gym's an additional, I think, just doing But,
Might be.
To be continued.
That's okay. Regardless, we're done.
regardless, we would.
Oh, no,
This
no, it is, the gym is additional to that, because it now,
Oh,
At least-
I'm looking at the plan and it clearly is additional.
It's additional.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, so there, so it would be basically 24,000 square
So
feet of
almost triple.
space for Park and Rec. And they're able, and they currently have 8,500 square feet. Included in that would be obviously a commercial kitchen, which they would get a lot of use out of, which they don't have now. And from what I heard in previous discussions, was an absolute need in a new building. They'd have upwards of 6 activity rooms, all about 800 square feet, which are bigger than the rooms you have now,
Mhm.
except for one.
Yeah,
if I'm not
one's a
mistaken.
little bit bigger. Yep,
Um,
correct.
as well as the multipurpose activity room where the cafeteria is now, and the gymnasium.
And library.
No,
Uh,
the library is disconnected.
They
Oh, okay.
disconnected that, but there is a small multi-purpose
This
room on
room,
the other side of
yeah.
the storage of the cafeteria. That is included for, again, whatever Park and Rec would use it for. So, again, obviously a town decision in the future, but they need a building. If the vote passes, we have 25,000 square feet, 24,000 square feet available in a building next door in a location in which they say is ideal for their program.
So just out of curiosity, like what does that do with the operating costs, right? Like if you're getting all that additional space.
What in revenues, like how would it
Right.
change your program?
Right.
So two different questions.
Yes,
Yeah.
there, sorry.
The operating cost. He's got the answers to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd let Michael talk more specifics on that, but obviously tripling our space is gonna increase our operating costs. It would probably increase our personnel costs as well. In the short term, but it would also increase our revenues, presumably increase our revenues, more space, more programs we could run. The fact that we would have a gym at our disposal 7 days a week would be immense. Like we've never had that. We're able to use Memorial School's gym for roughly 6 or 8 Saturdays in the winter to run a kindergarten basketball. And we run an adult volleyball pickup at Dale Street 1 night a week. That's my gym space. So outside summer camp, that's my gym space. We actually run pre-K and kindergarten basketball class because I coach it in the main hall of the FAF Center. It is a sight to see,
I'm sure.
both me coaching it and watching the kids. But we make use of the space that we have. I encourage people, if you want to know when we're at our height and you want to see girls playing field hockey inside, you want to see little kids playing basketball, you want to see a floor hockey exercise, you want to see karate, you want to see any of the other multitude of classes we got going on. I mean, there are days where it is a sight to see about how we're able to shoehorn what we have into that building. But we do make use of the space we have. But going into a new space, tripling our space, I mean, the sky's the limit. You know, the possibilities that we would be able to do are endless because we've never had the ability to operate a multi-space gymnasium in my 13 years here, so.
And right now, one of the things we've talked about is the age range that you're currently servicing,
Correct.
and if you get more space, what your potential, or you view your potential as.
Yeah, I mean, I view that we would, you know, we obviously hit the high school kids with jobs, so we employ high school kids. But we don't really service many kids after, you know, really after they leave Wheelock is kind of that age range that we start to lose them. This would allow us the opportunity to, you know, with gymnasium space, multi-use space, even if you said, you know, one of those activity rooms that Mike was referencing, we turn into a homework hangout room for kids to come after school. They don't want to go home, but, you know, they want to hang out with friends. You know, we would be able to start hitting the Dale age, so that 4th grade through middle school, you know, kids that we don't see outside special events that we run on a regular basis. We see some of those kids during summer camp, but there are kids I hired this summer that I hadn't seen since they were literally at Dale Street. And then 3, 4, 5 years later, I'm hiring them to work for me. So it would allow us that ability to stay with kids when we get them as toddlers in a mommy and me class and keep them right through until they work for us. You know, so it would just open up more possibilities for that and different ways that we could help serve the community. You know, on half days, you see kids descend on downtown, and now we have an opportunity for them to come somewhere where they could come do something productive. It could be pick up basketball, it could be an area to do homework, it could be a place to, you know, you put up a couple TVs and some video games and let the kids come and hang out with each other and monitored by staff that are there. But, you know, ideas that we have of things that we could potentially do down the road if given a space. And, you know, when I was in Wellesley, we had time during half days and early release days where kids would come, they drop a bucket, a dollar in a bucket and go play basketball for 2 hours, 3 hours at a time for $1. But it wasn't about the dollar. It was about now the kids had a place to go to do something. So I think that's one of the real possibilities that is going to be afforded to us in space, you know, tripling our space, is we can do different things than just what we're currently offering right now.
And I would point out that Jim has a stage, you know, so it's actually, you know, you might have even the possibility, I'm way out of my zone, but you have the possibility to look at adding some sort of theater or component or something. I mean, I'm looking at the plan. I don't know if that's been passed around, and it's kind of, you know, fairly new to us, but it's pretty impressive when you look at how that lays out.
Already dealing with the vision of Kevin teaching basketball, directing a play is something that
I'm putting Tim's name down here to run a play at the new rec center.
I always wanted to be in theater, Kevin, so that's great.
you're gonna direct,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
So can you talk a little bit about if the building, Dale, gets demolished, how does that impact your programming? And what alternatives would you have?
Being upfront and honest, it would kill us. You know, our summer camps we would lose a lot of our summer camps. We'd lose a lot of our ability to.
Because the proximity to the pond.
Well, if there's no, so in just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, if we're still at the FAP Center, so I'm still currently where I'm at, and they take down the Dale Street School in its current state is gone.
Yeah.
We're
No replacement?
we're
Is that what
done.
you
Like,
mean?
so you're
Yeah.
saying, yeah, we're,
Even if
We-
construction took 2 years, he'd be out for 2 years.
I mean, you're talking, I had 611 kids go through our older camp that specifically use Dale Street School.
Okay.
And that doesn't include days that on those, if you want to see a true remarkable thing, come on a rain day in the summer when I had 100 and Amanda's laughing because she saw it. I had 80 kids in the Dale Street gym in the older camp, and I had 140 kids in the FAP Center.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such a code.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's different. Yeah, that's a code.
But the last question I have for you guys, I don't know who can answer, maybe Mike or you guys. So assume you did move into Dale.
Yeah.
Then FAP becomes available, right? The question of what do we do with FAP at that point? Okay. So let's.
I'll let Mike Marcucci.
What's the cost of demolishing? Have we looked at the cost of demolishing FAP?
Not that I'm aware of, I could.
Yes.
It's not, I mean, you'd have to abate it first.
The abatement would be the most expensive part of that building, getting in terms of demo, and the demo of that building is.
Less than 2 million.
Well,
Because the demo of
it's-
Dale is less.
2 million.
is
a couple of
two, right?
$100,000, Tim, to abate.
Yeah, I mean, it's the abatement that's the issue, and I think I don't think it would be, I think it'd be like, $100,000 to demo that building, something like that.
Jim, that PVC 2008 study, after the completion of the public safety building, wasn't the FAP supposed to be leveled for parking?
I don't remember. I mean, I think when we were looking at replacements for Park and Rec, it was always going to be leveled as either a pocket park or parking or something, but I don't remember exactly, Mel, what that looked like back then. That demo of that building is not a driver by any stretch.
Down in 3 days, it's the abatement that's gonna take some time and take some dollars.
Okay, good. That's great news. I just wanted to know. That's good.
Yeah.
What about the capital item for, I think it's just lumped together, but schools and roof replacement?
The $1 million allotment we have a year, it's not for schools, that one?
It was on the capital improvement project list, it's like 13.5 million for.
The roof replacements on the capital improvement, Jeff, Dr. Marsden would know better, but I'm pretty sure those are not. I think Dale, which is I think is a slate roof.
Okay.
But I think the ones they're talking about, these are the middle school roof and high school roof, isn't it? Jeff, Dr. Marsden? See there?
I think we're gonna put a pin in that question until we change that, people sitting in the owl seat. So before we change the owl seat, and I know that both Mel and Rob were here and neither of you got a chance to answer many questions, so I didn't know if either of you wanted to say anything about Park and Rec or the programs before we switch to youth outreach.
Just from the commission standpoint, I've been involved since 2000 and 2009, and to see that, a lot of people say that the high schoolers are underserved in this town recreationally, and I believe they're not served at all, quite frankly. We're a K-6 based recreational program. We do very little for seniors. We do virtually nothing with the exception of employing high schoolers during the summertime and a few of them during the rest of the season. But, our mission statement is to basically supply a quality, reasonably priced recreational opportunities for the town. And I think it's because we don't have space, we offer nothing for our teens. And, there's a reason for decades. I know my kids and their friends and younger kids, older kids, they would call Medfield Deadfield. And they'd end up jumping in their car when they got their license and no place to go here for them. And they'd be exploring other towns and whatever, wherever the teens are hanging out. And if we have the space, that's one of the things we'll address directly is teen space. Whether it's, a couple of computers, some game tables, whatever, just to get them there. There's some place they can go other than home or the library. Starbucks, yeah. Right.
Rob, did you want to say anything before we go to youth outreach?
I'll keep it brief because I know you have a pretty large agenda still ahead of you, but I mean, really, we are in the business of really hopefully becoming a wellness-oriented group, not just for our young people in town, but for the community. And that's the part of the population that we don't serve. And certainly being able to do it in a downtown location closer to the community would be ideal for us right now.
Okay. All right, we're good to go to youth outreach?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tim. I think that you and Mike are probably good if you guys. Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
Just alone.
We want the hand mason. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me on behalf of Medfield Outreach to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we might make potential use out of Dale should the cookie crumble in that fashion. So I'll start wherever you want me to. I don't know. where you want me to start.
Yeah, I think describe, like kind of sharing, I think over the years, you have taken on more and more, including in COVID. So I think just summarizing the work we do and kind of the trends with Medfield Outreach. I think when I started, it was youth outreach and it's expanded to Medfield
Yes.
outreach, so.
Yes, we did. So we rebranded because we were sort of, our title of youth outreach was inaccurate. We do service any Medfield resident. We tend to sort of split between the Council on Aging and our office. So our mission is to serve the community residents here in Medfield with a whole host of social services. And those social services fall into sort of three piles, just for the sake of description. One is clinical-based services, so counseling and clinical consultation, assessment, referrals out to collateral agencies. The second sort of main thing we do is assist with needs-based services. So accessing financial assistance programs. And the third thing we do, which is growing, and when I heard Kevin talk, got me thinking of how much synergy and overlap we potentially have, is we already work closely together on some projects, but is our prevention work. And our prevention work is growing and growing. And, I think that when I think about being a practitioner, I think you'd be remiss not to focus on prevention and only focus on intervention and treatment, right? Because you can reach a much wider range when we think about prevention. So we do our prevention work, the majority of our prevention work, through two coalitions, which are Medfield Foundation initiatives, but are administered largely by Medfield Outreach. And those two coalitions, one looks to promote mental health, good mental health, and the other is to reduce youth substance use. And we, in 2019, applied for and were granted a grant from Drug Free Communities for 5 years, $125,000 each year, with increasing sustainability that the town is supposed to match. We're just about to enter year 3, and the demands on us to increase our match will increase. With that funding, we hired a full-time substance use prevention coordinator. And she has been working very closely with us in our office, with the high school and with the middle school, and is now focusing on younger age students, but she really started with our high school work. And one of the things that's come clear that we really need to work on is to create a youth coalition. So when I hear Kevin talking about, and you talking about missing this population, we couldn't agree more. And I think I get excited hearing him talk, because there could be a real great synergy between rec and clinical support and prevention work, all kind of culminating together, especially if we had some space close by that, you got a youth in your program and something's going wrong, and you have some clinicians close by, or referral or needs-based work that the family could come in and talk to us. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but so I got excited about that. Sorry, but I got really I'm going to work with them, and I want to eat in the kitchen. But I know it sounds like I'm eager to get into Dale, and the truth is I am, but I don't want to give up our space in the high school. I think is really important space. And I feel that way because it's got its limitations, which I'll explain to you in a moment. But right now, 100% of our service provision is for middle school or above. And I think that speaks to our location. We have really close working relationships with the high school admins, guidance, all high school staff pretty much. And the same is true for the middle school. And I think it's because the ease in which people come to meetings, we can go into the building, kids are there, we can see them during a crisis if the appropriate paperwork's in place. We can be there for our immediate after school appointment prior to sports or after sports or before school or during a flex period if mental health needs are trumping educational needs, right? So we're there to sort of help and support the school's work in promoting success of kids. And we can do that in a whole variety of ways, and we have been doing that. So I would not want to give up that space for Dale space. My ask would be potentially some satellite offices in Dale to help not only improve upon that synergy, perhaps that we can increase our programming with Parks and Rec, but also provide services for the younger population in Medfield, which is underrepresented in our current work. And I think the proximity of being in Dale Street would mean that we're close to Memorial, we're close to the kids who are younger that are using Park and Rec services. families who are familiar with Dale would be comfortable in coming into that building. They kind of know where things are. They know the park. There's a familiarity, which promotes mental health treatment. Barriers are, I don't know where to go. I don't know who it is. So just sort of seeing us, knowing where we're located, knowing what we do is going to increase people's access to our services. A little bit about our services. During the pandemic, we quickly pivoted. Let me tell you who our staff is. We only have 3 staff. There's myself, and I'm the director. I'm also a licensed social worker. We have Chelsea Goldstein Walsh, who many of you have probably met before, and she is a outreach clinician. And then we have Mary Haas, who is our substance use prevention coordinator, and she right now is fully funded by that grant. So during the pandemic, Chelsea and I, because we're the only 2 that can provide clinical services, immediately got certified in telehealth. So we did a week-long class, got certified, and started providing all our services via telehealth. And I think just in that short time that the school, well, it felt really long, but the short time that the kids were not in classes, that they were fully remote, we provided more than 4,000 minutes of clinical services via telehealth. Soon as the kids came back into the school, we masked up and we either went into the school until we got the green, with their permission to use their space, until we got the green light to open up our offices. And we're one of the few youth and family programs in the surrounding towns that is providing in-person services even currently. And so that's something we're really proud of, because a lot of people had been zoomed out and just really couldn't access their treatment, or weren't choosing to access their treatment anymore via telehealth. So we're fully back in person, but there's a couple of us. So the current space is good location-wise for access to students, but where it trips us up is, in effort to increase our clinical reach, I reached out to Boston College, and we have a graduate intern. So we have a graduate intern who can take on a caseload with supervision from myself. But our space, we have to make sure it's a confidential space. So we kind of all shift and move and go, because not every spot in that space that we have has closing doors or is confidential. So we are maxed out, and we're kind of even over maxed right now in terms of everybody having a confidential space. I would have liked to take 2 interns on, which would have increased our clinical abilities even a little more, but I couldn't do that due to space requirements. We are seeing a lot of demand for mental health services currently. During the pandemic, it was a little more needs-based, which you would expect. And now it is definitely needs-based, is still there, but it's quieted down, and clinical need is up greatly. And we are providing individual services, family services, a lot of consultation, some drop-in services to try to bridge people over from all the wait lists that they're on in other agencies. So they're providing some temporary touch points until they can get hooked up with their long-term providers. So our ask, if again, things that go in the right order, would be for some office space at Dale Street, and either a big youth room, some sort of large room, rec space type of thing, where it wouldn't have to necessarily be outreaches, but where we could house our prevention coordinator, where she could interact with the kids, where she could provide prevention programming, and just rub elbows with the kids and get to be in there and know them. As well as some space for us to do needs-based work, clinical appointments. So not a big ask, really. And that would be in addition to the space that we have.
And if the vote were no, what does your program look like, right? Like what would you, like if you have the opportunity to move space, I think you can obviously capitalize on a lot of synergies with Kevin's programs, and you could hopefully expand. If it doesn't happen, then what are you?
If it doesn't happen, we'll keep doing the good work we're doing.
Yeah.
We're gonna be maxed out soon. We're gonna have to start telling residents no. So right now, we've either been able to find more appropriate resources for the folks who have called us. So when someone calls us, we have to determine fit. And right now, we've been able to outsource people to the appropriate fit or treat them in-house. And we are about at our capacity. And that's with the increased services. We are servicing more people clinically than historically that office has serviced. And we've tried to be flexible to even increase it more with those drop-in hours, so that someone could sign some paperwork and have a one-off session or a two-off session instead of committing to the process of maybe having to come to therapy every week, because some people might just need some advice or need to know, is this a problem? Is this not a problem? What do I do about this? Who do I reach out to? What are the right sort of agencies I should contact if this is going on? So that's a service that we provide. I like to say we're sort of like that hub in the wheel where we hook people up to the appropriate resources, whether it be needs-based or clinical services.
In the services that you provide, say, like at the high school, is that interactive with the guidance counselors or is it separate?
So good question. It's usually separate, but in collaboration with. So most of our clients, if they are students in the high school and middle school, which most of them are, most of them have signed a release that we use in a discretionary way to help them with whatever their issues are. And if talking to a guidance counselor or talking to an adjustment counselor or talking to a nurse helps the problem they're having, then we would exercise that right to communicate with parents' knowledge that it would be signed off on and would be explicit that we're allowed to do that. So we very often collaborate with staff in the school to promote better outcomes for our clients. Yes.
You do great work.
Oh, thank you.
I guess one more question.
Sure. You gotta ask me a little more. I'm like, I'm ready.
In the current proposal, it's an elementary campus. All right, so you've talked about resources, and you talked about collaboration. Would an elementary campus 2 through 5 be of value, or would it make any difference to what you're in?
I do think it would make a big difference, because right now our services are completely skewed towards middle and high school. And that's not because Chelsea and I can't service younger kids. We can. In fact, I've worked with 0 to 3, but especially used to be really little. So we are definitely trained child clinicians as well, through the gamut. But that population, honestly, probably because of the impact of the pandemic, little kids using telehealth isn't as easy, right? And so we got filled up with the middle school and the high school population, also because we're in there, we're visible, staff knows us, they refer to us developmentally, they're going through more than the little kids. And so they're being, the younger folks, the younger students and their families really are disproportionately underrepresented in our service right now, and who we're targeting.
So if you're trying to serve someone over, on Wheelock, the proposed 4 or 5 at Wheelock, do you need space there? You don't have space today. How do you service those kids today?
They would
Do you
have,
go over there, or do they have to come to you? Or-
usually they come to us, and this is a little bit of a problem because parking is really, really, really tight during the school day until school lets out. So if it's after school, it's less of a problem, but kids that young would need a ride for mom and dad. They would come in, and we have one space that's appropriate for kids that young, because kids that young tend to use play therapy. And so they need manipulatives, they need blocks and houses and all different kinds of toys to express their issues through play. And so that limits us to one space. So you couldn't see 2 young kids at the same time, because otherwise where we're seeing kids is in this little tiny little office, like really small. And they need to move and get down and play and be able to move, and they're more
Right.
expressive. So we would be limited in how many younger kids we could see at the same time. Does that answer your question? We wouldn't have to necessarily go into one of the elementary schools, but we could if there was appropriate space and the administration in that school was on board and the parent was on board for us to treat the child in that space.
So like a new Wheelock
Mhm.
building, we had extra space there, you could use that.
Absolutely, provided that the principal there was on board and mom and dad, caregivers said, yes, I give you permission to see my child in school. And school said, sure, that's fine, then yes, absolutely.
It's good to know.
Right, thank you.
Very helpful, thank you.
That's good.
You're very
Yeah, you did
welcome.
fantastic.
Oh, and we need a little storage space. I forgot to-
Oh, you do.
It's all Mary's fault. She keeps buying all this prevention stuff and I can't, every time I open a closet, it's like gonna fall out on me. And I told her I was telling on her tonight, so.
Oh, there you
So we
go.
need a little storage.
A little bit more than just a Rubbermaid container.
Just-
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you. everybody.
All right, well, so I think we're gonna transition to operating and capital costs. Dale, for whoever would like the owl seat. I know Mr. La Francesca was gonna come up to an owl seat. And whoever he's bringing as his guest owler. Yes. Oh, that's
So who
funny.
won the
All right,
game?
so yeah, order of business.
Who won the game?
Mayfield.
All right, there we go.
If I could just add, I know Kathy just spoke, but it's been a great partnership the last few years since she's been here, and it wasn't always the way she described, so I just really appreciate the work that she does, and it's been really, really an awesome addition to our town, so I'm thankful she's here.
Steve, I just got that number for modular units cost that you were looking for. So we can address that now, or we can address.
Because I just gave it to him.
Okay.
I told Steve earlier,
Okay.
we got it.
Yeah, sure, if you want to do that.
So there, the modular units, at least there's the standard modular unit, which is $32 a square foot. And then the one that we saw on, I believe it was Facebook, that was more called a premier modular unit that goes for $62 a square foot. And I can get you that paperwork. With the current model that we have right now that we're going forward, if we were going back to Dale Street, we would need 10 modular units on site, which is about 9,240 square feet. So it,
10 modulars and how many square feet?
9,240 square feet. And the cost for that $32 a square foot, it's only for the modular units. It doesn't include removal cost or what the 3-year lease on top of that would be.
So the 10 modulars is what's the assumption on that?
That's I believe it's a classroom, and I'm not 100% sure if it's going to have restrooms.
So that, in other words, that is,
That's so if you take
what are you assuming we need 10 modules for?
So that would be if you're expanding Dale Street currently.
Yeah.
And you're keeping the students on site, you would have to move students out of the current building into modular units, right? So they can fix a section of that building.
So kind of the
Should be ad rental, yeah, the ad rental and the stages and all that.
So
Do we want to back up for a hot second, and do you want to ask the question that was just answered so we know?
Yeah.
I started to follow it, but I think that.
So I asked Dr. Marston to get us some information from the architects about the cost of modulars. There was sort of a one number back in the PSR stage where they went through all the options. There was sort of one number without understanding sort of what was behind it in terms of, was it a standard modular, was it an expensive modular, how many modulars were there, that kind of stuff. That was sort of, what they came back and gave us sort of the two different prices for modulars. And then it sounded like your 10 assumption was the ad reno.
correct. And but just that $32 a square foot is just that to install, that's the.
That's just the-
installation cost.
that's
Yeah,
the-
Yeah, so the total estimated cost that they gave us, and this is a 3-year lease with a removal cost involved in there as well. The range for they're calling them standard modulars, would be 877,800 at the low end. At the higher end, the range would be 1.3 million. It's actually 1.367,520.
That for a 3-year lease.
That's a
3-year lease. The construction,
For 10 of them.
yes, the construction timeline that they have for the duration was 30 to 36 months. For the premium ones, the ones that Michael had mentioned, that picture was actually, our architects told us was built for an exhibition at a museum in 2008, that picture that was there. So we let them take a look at that and they priced those out as well. That was on the low end, 1.2 million. And on the upper end, 2,088,240. And I think the important piece about the estimates that they have, this assumes a flat site. Cost does not include any site work, which includes but not limited to a soil test, soil bearing capacity, grading the site, stormwater management, clearing the site, landscaping and paving. If required, does not include any utilities to the site area, does not include sprinkler design, installation for fire, does not include fire alarm design, does not include any general contractor markup. So we're getting, the numbers I gave you is bare bones. I mean, that's just for the building.
Dr. Martin, my understanding from one of our meetings last week is that you are now leasing a modular for the language.
So
Dale?
Insurance.
Do you
Insurance.
know what the insurance company is paying for that?
We could look at it, we could ask them.
When next year's premium comes.
Yeah, we could ask them.
That might be.
once the project's over, we do get a cost.
Right, but it might be good, that might be a frame from it.
Right.
Actual cost
You
right
can-
now
you
for
can
one
send that to
unit.
us.
Okay, yeah, we'll send that to you.
Well, that might, well, I guess the modular question is a good segue into, I know we wanted to talk about kind of the state of Dale and what has to be repaired there in the near term and the longer term. So I guess you have all the numbers over there, so I don't want to, do you have a specific order that is easier for you to
Yes.
walk through for us?
So we can definitely, we can walk through what is currently in that 20-year plan, right? And what is-
Whatever order you want to go in, and then we'll jump in with questions.
I think it's important to understand that the numbers that Michael will share, what we go over, is if it stays as a school.
Correct.
I think that's important, if it's, as long as it stays as a school. I think one of the
So
things that.
this assumes it fails and it stays as a
Correct,
school. So that's what we're
I
going
think
through.
one of the things that Mike Marcucci said last night was very good. It's just that it's never as loaded as a building as when it's a school, right? Every inch is being used. So in order to have that capacity, you need to make sure that all these things are in place, which would be very different if it was a park and rec or something else. But so this is if it were to stay to the
Mm-hmm.
school, and this is kind of what we've already done, what is planned and what the future is.
So let's talk about what we have already done and what's planned to be done in the near future, because we have to continue to maintain that building, because we still are in that building. So just simple things such as the new walk-off mats, those were replaced this past year. That was $1,000. We did the valves, we replaced valves in the building. That was $12,000. We are in the process of replacing the gutters because those need to be replaced. Otherwise, you're going to get water penetrating through, right? So that's $10,000. And we're also planning to repair the auditorium stage curtains that need to be done, and that's $5,000. Part of which I mentioned earlier, because of COVID, a lot of this stuff was pushed forward, and we used the grants, the federal grants, to help us get the buildings ready, so we could get students and staff back into the buildings. There was an additional cost to the ventilation system or the valves of $20,000 that were done. And then we're currently looking at engineering the portico, the front portico. That's right now something that has to be addressed. The engineering study on that is $30,000, so that's something that is planned. And then,
that was approved at the last time.
correct, yeah, so we're in the process of getting those numbers currently. And then we do have a number for that, it's not a final number, but right now, the rough number is about $400,000 to address that issue of the building.
And that's a structural issue.
That's a
It is.
structural issue. And that's what I'm saying, these are things that have to get done. What we have deferred is the paving, the walkways. We've done some tree removal around the property, but there's still is some tree removal that needs to be done. If you look at the building envelope, we need to do some engineering on that. Those original bricks, and it's just repointing and some repairs that have to be done with that, the outside of the building. We have to seal coat the outsides. We're looking at windows. Not all the windows are currently working properly, so those have to be addressed. Doors are being, if it continues to stay as a school, we do have certain security protocols that we need to address, which are, looking at the doors, making sure that the proper lock system is in place, and continuing with that process. And then we talked earlier about the roof. There's a study in here for $200,000 to do a roof engineering study. There we are, and we have done repairs to certain sections of the roof at that building. I think it was about 5 years ago.
Band-Aids.
Yes, we did one section of that roof that needed to be done. And the second section is that back section. That's why we have the modular unit that's going to be addressed shortly. And then we do have ADA compliances that we have to also address. There are areas such as.
Excuse me, did you, on the roof engineering, just to do the engineering, do you have any estimate on?
200,000.
200.
I'm sorry, an estimate to do the actual repair?
2.4 million.
Yeah, 2.4 million.
And just so I'm clear, because it's a lot of information, a lot of numbers. At some point, and you may be already doing it, but at some point, like when you make reference to ADA compliance, right? To be able to understand when that kicks in, and if you were looking at, let's say the current proposal was approved and you moved out of the building effective September 2024, which of these, eventually, which of these costs are deferrable and which are not?
Yeah, so if it stays as a school, there's certain requirements, right? This is
Well,
what
that's my
we're talking
point. So
about.
if it didn't stay at school
So
after
if it didn't-
September 2024,
Yeah.
do you need to have ADA compliance?
Well, I actually would ask the other way, like, if the vote fails and they have to stay in the building.
Which that's what I think they're
That's
going
two
to.
scenarios.
Yeah. This is
I
where
agree,
we're
Rob.
going.
I'd like to see the other way, right? Because some of this might have to be
Right,
done to
you-
get.
you- It's
these
either,
other-
it's one or the other.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
just
yeah.
flip it, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying that, we put, then you have the other issue of, okay, if it has to be done, when? It doesn't fall under the.
So I think it would depend on the use, like
Correct.
what the
Correct.
new use is going to be and what sections of the building are going to be used all the time. I think we'd have to take a look at that and see what the plan would be, and then take a look at what's deferrable at that point and what's not, because some of it definitely would not be deferrable, but some of it could be based on the sections of the building being used.
Right, because I think timing is a big piece of
Right.
this too.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's correct, what portion of that building is going to be used, right? And
What I'm hearing is there's a certain set of costs if it's assumed to operate as a school,
correct,
and then there's another set of costs if it's not a school.
correct. So, we just went through, what we feel, right? We sat down with our facilities director and what needs to get done, right? So for instance, if they're gonna be using the kitchen, there's a need for the dishwasher to be replaced, right? So that cost is in here. It doesn't matter if that's a school or if it's park and recs, if they're using that section of that building, that dishwasher has to be addressed.
Michael, could you clear up the issue around why we needed to put a new Jim Florian recently?
Sure, so that interesting that when they originally built the building, it was done in different, there was a 1962 section, there's a 1942, I believe, section, which is
Look
the
at my
original.
Twitter account today.
Yep, and then there's a 1990, which is with the backside
Right.
of that building. So when the engineer came in, so this happened, I want to say about, I don't know, 14, 15 years ago. I wasn't here, but they had a floor gym flooded and they had to replace it. So they replaced it and it was a brand new gym. But they didn't address the issue that was behind it, which the issue behind it was that they have the gutters on one side of the building, instead of flowing out, were flowing underneath the gym floor to the other side. So when the table, right, the water table got high and the piping system was blocked, it all came back up. So we had to address that during the pandemic, was we needed to fix that system underneath the building so it doesn't happen again, and then replace that.
So that wasn't a roof then, just because I know that, just so we clear, it wasn't a roof that caused that.
No, that was the pipe being.
That was just like-
Yeah, so when they went to take the floor out, they noticed that the pipe was being piped from one side of the building to the other through the gym.
Yeah.
And that was already done.
Yes, we
So
should address that.
the 2.4 million roof number,
Mhm.
that's assuming it's a school.
So
Or
that's,
is that, in other words, is that in your school operating budget?
no, this is a part of the facilities capital budget.
My understanding from
So that's been
talking to Amy initially is that all this deferred maintenance has to get done no matter what, whether or not it's a school
we-
or
we
it's a
just
park and
heard-
rec.
we
I think
heard
it's
it.
more of a timing issue on some of the things, because I think the current 5-year plan assumes that a renovation of some kind is gonna happen to Dale, so it stops at a certain point. Is
So
that fair to say?
So what we looked at was in the next 5 years,
Yeah.
what do we need to do to continue to maintain that building for the next 5 years?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
those items are in here.
Yeah.
If we stay at Dale, because the vote fails, then there's certain things that we have to get done, that we have deferred, that.
So they have to get done sooner.
Correct, they have to get done sooner than later.
So these were items that were on the original assessment that Jerry did in 2017, that we should have done already in the past fiscal years that we haven't done yet.
Oh, so
And how
this
much does that add up
2.4
to?
is in that.
It's in that plan, oh yeah, that's in
It's
that.
in the things that you should have done in the last 3 or 4 years, but you sort of delayed.
So I think what I'm trying to get at is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, if this was your question, is that I think that what you're trying, so there's a current 5-year plan
There is.
that makes an assumption that it won't be a school at some point because a renovation would have happened, correct?
Correct.
And then what you guys are walking through now is how that changes if the renovation doesn't
If
happen.
it doesn't happen, then
Is
these are the things that we have to address.
And that costs 2.4.
So that number, right, is in your 20-year capital plan, correct? From Jerry's 2017 study. We are currently working with an engineer, right, to make sure that we can get better numbers as we move forward. The goal would be, and Michael Pucci, was that when we do the roofs, right, that we try to do them all at once. Through the savings, through the facilities, but we know that there's not enough. That 13.5 million you're talking about is multiple buildings. It's not just
Yeah,
one building.
together.
It's
Yeah,
the
that was
whole-
my-
the whole
Yeah.
district.
Yeah.
But the 2.4 has to get done, whether if we log passes over there, you still need to do the 2.4 on the.
Yes, so I can,
No, he dropped off, but I
We heard
think-
from him that it was like $2 million to get it ready for Park and Rec,
Mhm.
Just
Up to
that
total.
amount, but not any of the.
right? That's what he said, 2 million.
Yeah, I think they're two, I
That's to
think
bring
they're
to
two
core.
different things, because I think that what Tim was talking about, that was like the sprint, that's changing it to business use, that's the sprinklers and the things like that. So that's $2 million to get it to use for Park and Rec.
Yeah.
And then I think this $2 to $3 million is just deferred maintenance that has to happen.
Correct.
So you add them together.
Okay.
Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say.
Okay.
And
Is
just-
that where you were going?
And just to
Okay.
be, just
My
for
number is a
little bit
clarification,
more than two.
some of these items will be when we begin the budget process.
For the capital.
Right.
Well, yeah, I guess that's part of my question, and maybe that's part of a Mr. Marcucci question, since you were one of the people behind the municipal stabilization fund. So a lot of the things that you guys are talking about right now, like the ones that were already in the plan are already in the 5-year plan for the municipal stabilization fund. So it's
The roof project has been in there all along.
Correct.
And
Right.
the expectation is, what we plan for, and we have approval from the Department of Revenue,
Correct.
is that we would bond the roof project and pay the debt service out of the municipal building stabilization.
Correct.
So it's
we wouldn't have
not like another-
$5 million, no, this is part of what's already covered in the expected municipal building
Yeah,
stabilization.
it's already part of the plan.
already
The way we
approved.
define it, we're allowed to pay debt service out of
Yeah.
it. So we can bond the 13.5 million, but it wouldn't be an override, it wouldn't be a separate vote, it would be paid out of, just like football field is not an override, it's paid out of the regular levy. It would be paid out of the municipal building stabilization fund over 20 years.
Yeah.
We wouldn't get MSBA reimbursement if it wasn't a school.
Right,
Yeah.
we can get some
Right.
MSBA reimbursement
Correct.
for that roof project.
Okay.
That's right, Michael.
That's
If
what it said.
If it's a
it
school,
remains a school.
remains a
yes.
school,
For a
yes.
portion of the project, some of that is definitely gonna remain schools.
Right, so Blake,
But most of the
Memorial,
roofs involved
yeah.
are schools.
Yeah.
So. of the
And you're
13
proposing to do it.
So
all.
it makes sense.
We proposed all.
Yeah, all at
Basically,
once.
it's a townwide roof project. That would be bonded in 2026. Right, and paid over
Yes.
20 years, but the debt service would be paid out of the funds that are already paying taxes from the debt service on that project.
And I think that's an important point, because the numbers that are being discussed are, they're different components, right? I mean, they all come out of the town bucket, and with the schools and the town budget. But in terms of incremental, directly tied to the proposed school, and then next steps, I think are some, that's what I make some of that distinction, because as I said, the roofs that we discussed, big dollars are in.
Or
town
they're-
budget,
they're
already
accounted
being
for.
discussed,
They're already
being
accounted
reviewed.
for.
It's not gonna be like one way or the other, it's not gonna be, directly impacted by the special vote, right? So I'm just trying to make that distinction. so-
Right, and I think the other distinction that I would like to try to clear up / ask the question on is that, so we have a municipal stabilization fund that exists, that gets funded $1 million every year to deal with these projects. Is it fair to say that the 2 to 3 million that you're talking about is kind of in that plan for the municipal stabilization fund, so it's not extra? So then
Yes.
my second half of that question is the no more than 2 million that Tim and Mike were talking about for the Park and Rec stuff is obviously different, because that wasn't in the plan yet. And they already went home, and I'll just say that Mike Quinlan had sent me an email when he wasn't sure whether or not he could get Mike Weber to come. He had mentioned, and Christine or Mike, maybe you guys know better, like he had said that maybe some of the funds available or ideas for funding that. I guess what I'd like to do is find out what the options are, like not committing anybody to anything, but I guess some of the options are like, do we have money from the public safety building project that's left over? Like, can that be used, and how much is that? Is there any opportunity to do any of those things inside of the municipal stabilization fund? And then I guess maybe a third option is it a bonding thing that goes back to what Kevin was saying earlier? That they think that their revenues can help fund bonding, like
So,
A, B, and
yes.
C, or D, like what are those the options?
Those, yeah, and Michael can speak to this as well. Those are among the options. I
Mhm.
think whatever happens with the school, we will then update the 20-year
Correct.
capital plan. And so we'll figure out within there, is there room within that capital plan for some portion of those transitional costs, if there's gonna be transitional costs. There is $600,000 left over for the public safety building being under budget, and that can be used on any sort of building related project. So it can be used to cover the cost of the demolition of that, it can be used for some of these costs. It can, you know, it's, as long as it is going towards a project that could be bonded for 20 years, you can use the funds that we save from the public safety building coming out of budget for that. So that's one bucket of money. National Building Stabilization Fund is another bucket. And you have to know a little bit what we're shooting at, the exact target to develop that funding plan for it. But those are some of the potential sources for that.
And so I'm assuming that some of those costs are already in our capital plan, you know, such as, like I said, the dishwasher or, you know, changing, you know, tiles, floor tiles. Those are costs that are already built within our.
And the changing the floor tiles, is that I've had some people say to me, what does it cost to get Dale not to be a hazmat? Like, so are the floor tiles the hazmat? Like, what part is the,
So
or is it the asbestos in the basement? Like, both.
Both.
Yeah.
Both. You know, so you would go, and those costs are built into this 20-year facility
Plan, they're already in the municipal stabilization fund plan. Okay.
So,
If the roof is reimbursable for MSBA, that's the accelerated repair
Right,
program. Then if Wheelock passes, then that statement of interest better go in fast while there's still a school.
so I can tell you right now, I can tell you right now that if we went to the MSBA and Dale Street was part of our, you know, study, they probably would remove that.
Yes.
They laugh at you and kick you out the door, yeah.
Everyone lives in Dale Street now, they know Dale Street.
You don't have the option of keeping it as a school building.
You could, but I don't think that they would fund that.
I think that's a little bit of double
No, we're
dipping.
standing on it.
We'll be very happy.
Maybe.
Not guaranteed. We might not take it back.
But so
There's that town meeting.
for timing wise, we haven't put in, that's those are those quick projects that MSBA does.
Like the boiler we did.
Like the boiler we did at Wheelock. So we want to time that, so if it's 2026 is when we're gonna do all the roofs, so in 2000, probably 24 is when we start.
Start the
filing all those-
process.
Yeah, with them, with the MSBA.
Gotcha.
So can you, is there anything else on capital that you want to?
No, so I just was going through quickly what things that, you know, if we stay there as a school that we would have.
Big
to
items,
address.
yeah.
Big
Yeah.
items.
And so on the operating, the operating budget, we need to talk about that. So I think we met, Newton. Yes, Ed and myself met with Mike to go over costs. Incremental costs of the new building. And when we did that, he shared with us the current cost of the existing Dale Street building. So we do have that information. Is that fair?
No, that's fair.
We use what you gave us. the other
Yes, no,
day.
that's the cost to run that building.
So I think there was like, there was, I got this right. So for facilities cost, it looks like there's like a $165,000 of back in FY19. Facility costs for Dale. And it includes about 45,000 of electricity, some custodial supplies, maintenance, natural gas, telephone, water, sewer. That's kind of the amount of it. And so the question is, I guess, if if Park and Rec use this space they're talking about. I mean, in my mind, if he says they've got like a 20% profit margin, and that 800,000 of revenues. And that sounds like that would cover full cost of operating the jail. Where they're only gonna really use, Park and Rec's gonna use less than the full building, but. Am I thinking about that right? Is that the way that?
I mean, that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah.
I mean,
800,000 out of 20%, that's 160 profit that they could use to absorb some of these expenses.
And they currently.
Like every penny of my profit, please.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about this.
Remember how I said something I could use for the field? Other things to cover other costs.
But Kevin,
Royal
but Kevin, what's your current cost to run that building?
I'd have to look, because we pay it out of both operating and our revolving account.
So
it's not-
I mean, if I make, looking at this building and looking at that building, I would say about 65,000.
I would say it's fair.
So if that's the cost to run, so you're not adding 165,000 to that budget, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So if they're, I would say, if you just take that portion out and you're looking at the 100,000, I would say that they're probably using 20% of that 100,000 on top of that 65,000. That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, okay.
You got a couple of bucks left.
I was just suggesting that if you don't, I was just thinking that you could save on custodial if you just had that be an activity before the kids go home.
Responsibility.
I'll let Amanda
Hey.
say how her kids do with picking up at camp, so.
Oh.
Vivian was
Not, but not just her
very.
kids in general, they can't. I would say cleaning up is not an activity they would.
Oh,
Doesn't
man.
get a gold star at all.
Oh, gosh. All right, I'm just kind of looking at my questions. Do you guys have some questions, or did we end up hitting them all? I assume you can get us a copy of the fancy spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. So-
Yeah, love that.
Well, with all the colors on.
I like the colors on it,
I know, that's why we did it.
but you didn't use purple.
I did.
So you guys currently.
Magenta.
Oh, it's okay.
You currently have the capital, that's your capital expenditures for the school, stays at school, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's this, the spreadsheet right here. So, and we currently also have a 5-year plan with the assumption that, we're moving forward with the new school.
Oh, that's, okay.
5-year plan is with current school.
Yeah.
So in the event of a no vote, okay, and you would have to continue for some period, say 5 years, even given that optimistic view of new plan. One of the things that was discussed in with the school committee meeting was accommodating growth. So when you talk about modulars, would you anticipate needing to spend something on, we continue to talk about the space not being adequate in the current situation. So what cost would be expected to be incurred in order to just maintain the school for 5 years in that review process and the whole reexamination and new proposal before a school was available in 2027?
I mean, I would say.
You
if we
consider
have-
that at this point?
Yeah, but we've talked about if the enrollment does go up as, it's been predicted, although Mr. Marcucci doesn't believe it. If it does go up, I think the natural thing that schools do, and I remember doing it in the 90s when it was booming in this whole inside 495 area, everyone was putting in modules. I think we'd have to look at doing that, attaching them. I'm thinking maybe Memorial first, if we get a boom there, and then just kind of going up the ladder if we need to.
But even if it didn't grow, given the assessment that's been made of the current state of the Dale School, would there be an expectation of expanding it in some way to accommodate?
We're doing it now, right? We have it right now. We module the parking lot right now. So I mean, I think as things fail, we have to take a look at it and see what we do.
One of the
for
comments
space.
that I read was, we get letters from different people, but we got one from a teacher who said in order to have a teacher's meeting, the principal needs to leave his office.
That's true.
That's true.
So is it reasonable to expect that for 5 years, the principal's gonna have to continue to leave his office and for teachers to have a private meeting? Or would we expect to have the cost of expanding the facility to accommodate? I mean, it would.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at that, Bobby. One of the things, the reason why we deferred so much of this is because of this project, right? So we didn't want to.
I understand that, but I mean, now we're talking about,
But now,
well, if this vote
Yeah.
We're
fails,
just
what
assuming
are
it
the
fails.
costs?
but what I'm saying is that, so now we're looking at getting back into the pipeline for 4 or 5 years, whatever that takes. I'm not so sure the town would be excited about spending even more money on space attached to that building. I guess that's my point. I mean, we may have to do it, but I don't think anyone would be very excited to do it. Knowing that we're looking at getting another building there in the first place, you know, so. If we have to, we will.
We're all, which we're accumulating information.
Yeah,
And we're gonna have to come to a recommendation that will include cost estimates. But I think, this is just my opinion, but I would say if we are saying, what's the cost of a no vote? I don't think it's reasonable to tell the teachers, you're just gonna have to live with the existing situation. And there's gonna be some accommodations, a cost to it, but, or we get the risk. The teachers are gonna, we don't keep on asking them to do so much.
agreed.
And I know you do, and
Yeah.
I'm looking at it from just a cost perspective.
Right,
If we're looking at future costs relating to a no, in my judgment can be wrong, it can be, corrected by the rest of the committee, but that there would be a cost to say, all right, we gotta do something to address
I guess,
data.
from my perspective, if the community doesn't want to support the new school, I just have a hard time with them supporting modulars added on to that, that's all. That's where I'm going, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, we're 24 minutes past when I turned into a pumpkin on my roll. Did you get, certainly I'm not shutting it down. I'm just wondering if anybody else has more questions.
Do we have anywhere, I mean, the 5-year plan, is that gonna be revised if the vote passes, so we see how that changes with the new location in the school?
So the 5-year plan, what we have there currently is, I'm looking at it right now. That's what I'm saying.
So if the vote passes, I think they'll probably say, we'll keep the dishwasher, let Kevin get the new one.
That would be one revision.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean,
Your place is self-zoning.
But in Canada, that's the kind of thing that's gonna happen. When we come down to the end of the year and you get $12,000, if you wanna cut, you need to put a program in or buy a dishwasher.
Yeah.
You end up putting the program and you don't buy the dishwasher. I mean,
That's what I'm
the
curious, how does
reality.
the plan
That's the
change,
reality,
right? I mean,
the
it's
context of a budget
projecting that.
I
conversation.
think we should.
We
talk
get
to
down
Amy.
to the 12,000.
Mhm.
But we
As you
should
know
think about
well.
it tonight.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And Jeff knows as well.
Absolutely.
Did you get the future operating expenses for the new school?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah, we have that.
okay,
Mhm.
so it's really just what capital is.
Well, I think that probably we can, Amy was at her kids' high school.
Yeah.
So, but we could circle back with her on that because what my initial discussion with her and Michael was like we have a list of what has to be done, no matter who's in the building.
Correct.
And so I think it's just a matter of, since the current plan assumes a renovation is gonna happen, we still know what all the other things that have to happen are. So I think it's just a question of
It's timing.
timing, like,
Yeah.
do any of those things
Yeah.
have to be accelerated? And I think that probably can be just a you could probably just meet with Amy and she could just walk through how that changes. I think that that's probably pretty.
Yeah, I think
we could do that.
Be a question. What can you
Together.
get?
Yeah.
It's just, what's the rest of it?
Right, I think that's probably, we have the now, they've done what it stays in the school, and then we
Yeah.
just we need to know how that changes if it becomes something else.
Yeah.
After the town meeting votes, after everybody.
Yeah.
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 That's
That's
a
a
really
good
hard
hard to have that.
Okay. Yes, anything else? Would you like to?
He's
make
waiting
a-
to make.
I was gonna say, would you like to make the motion?
I'd make a motion to adjourn if the owl doesn't mind.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Jim.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you very much.
Are you guys voting?
Yes,
to adjourn?
yes.
Do you want to vote to adjourn?
Shot in the left together.
All right, and I'll just say Jeremy joined at some point, but if Jeremy would like to vote to adjourn, if not, you're gonna be.
We just got to go. So we got to go.
All right, thanks, everybody.
We got to go.
Right.
Get in.